All right, so welcome to another video in our series of your home buying journey. So successful roadmap to home ownership. Today I have with me Michael Glassford. He's the owner of Legal Inc. Estate Planning. He's an estate planning and business attorney licensed in Utah and Missouri. He's helped hundreds of families over the past 2 decades to protect their hard-earned money, their homes, their businesses, and their stories. And you also have a farm, right? Family farm.
Yeah, we call it the Staffordshire. That's why I had.
Yeah. So I also talk about my animals a lot. So I got to plug in the animals when I can. And you always say being prepared legally is the best offense. So I think that's a great way to put it. Michael helped me with my mom's trust, which was literally a lifesaver for me. She owned 4 properties plus like her other assets and stuff like that. And I can't imagine not having the trust for her after she passed. So, your world's probably a lot like my world. Like most people don't want to talk about mortgages. Probably most people don't want to talk to attorneys, but trusts are a huge benefit to us. So it's kind of one of those things that in my mind, think about it, get it out of the way and get it done. Then you're protected. You have your plan put together. And so get your estate plan put together, get it done, and it's out of the way, and you don't have to worry about it unless you need to update it. So that said, what is a trust and what does that do for us? And how is it protected?
Everything that you've been taught about a will, you need a will, should get one in place and you'd be good. All the things that you think a will do for you, it actually doesn't, and a trust does. So the best way to define a trust is what your current definition of a will, that's actually what the trust is going to do for you. The will eventually does those things after it goes through court, and you're adding government oversight and proceedings and expenses. So that's the quickest definition. It's actually what you thought the will was doing, the trust actually does.
Like, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, but it's like the business that you are your little owner of. It's the business of your life. So you create this entity that the business manages, but you're still in charge of.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you watch The Matrix for the first time and they say there is no spoon, and you're like, I totally see a spoon there. You're like messing with me. There's a conceptual change to how you're gonna have your property owned, but once it's in place, then life goes on as normal. But it's exactly like what you just said. It's an entity. It's a legal entity that can own property in its name. So we create this entity and we put our home and other things into it. Now we need someone to manage it. So we name ourselves as the trustee, which is just a fancy name for manager. And we're going to manage the property on behalf of the trust. Oddly enough, that's the same job that you were doing when it was in your name. So your job hasn't changed. You just have a really cool title now. You're a trustee.
Right. Yeah. You're now the CEO of your life officially. Well, what does a trust do for a homeowner specifically? Obviously, a trust can encompass lots of things, but this is a home owning series. So how does that help a homeowner?
So for most of you, your home is going to be the largest asset that, to date. You're going to be investing in long-term investments and things like that and have a financial portfolio, but your home is going to be your most expensive, most valuable asset. And to put that into the trust, you're creating some insulation. Now, most trusts aren't asset protection trusts. They are out there, and we can always talk about that. But it's the first step into creating your asset portfolio. You've got your financial portfolio, and creating some insulation around that and some control around that we simply don't have when it's outside of that kind of model.
So that extra tool to protect that. We live in a very litigious society. So anything we can do to protect yourself that way is nice.
It's a very thin veiled barrier. I don't want people to be thinking that, oh, I have a trust, I'm asset proof. Like,
right.
If they can't take my house. You're still the trustee with 100% control over the trust. So if it gets to that point, a judge can look at you and say, you're the party to this action. I order you to release assets from that trust to pay bills. So that can still happen. But there are some, I call it security through obscurity, just by simple things like naming the trust not your name. So when they do a land search to see what you have, to see what they're suing for, they're not going to find that house immediately.
Interesting.
And they're going to make choices. They have a decision tree paradigm, that they're going to decide what they're going to go after. When I say they, I'm talking about the opposing counsel. They're going to decide, are you worth it? Are we going to sue you? Are we going to go to the mattresses? Are we just going to take an insurance claim? And the first step in that is if they don't see the house, eventually but in that cursory search, they're not going to see it, and they're going to make decisions not including the house. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just a little like umbrella, I guess, kind of.
Yeah, and then if you're in a position, a person that has higher exposure, higher liability, then there is something called an asset protection trust that you can put the house to, and have that insulation. But you give something up to have that. You give up control. Now, there's a third-party trustee. Someone else is the CEO of your life.
I see. Got
that. That's great for the asset coverage, but it is, you have to be okay with that. You're not in control anymore.
Interesting. Okay. I did not know that. Good to know. So there are different kinds of trusts, which obviously someone could talk to you about based on their needs. So I learned something new today. So thank you.
There's several kinds. That's why, it's important to sit down because, people say, well, how much is the trust? And I'm like, I equate that to saying, well, that's like going on to a car dealership and how much is car? And the dealer's like, which one? Do you want a truck? Do you want an SUV? Do you want a sedan, a sports car? So it takes a conversation to understand your goals and where you want to get, to understand the vehicle that you want. And then we build that around those goals.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So when should someone set up a trust?
So it's kind of like three things. It's like the whole tree adage, like when should you plant a tree 20 years ago? When's the next best time today? But there's a third component to that. And it's that you're thinking about it. If you're asking yourself, is it time? Yes. If you're not thinking about it yet, then you need to do a little more, you haven't arrived yet, because it has to be something that you're wanting to, have that third component click in so that you utilize it.
And once it's set up, you can, as your life evolves, you can adjust it or add things to it, right? Because you've created that entity. So even if you just own a home today and that's your biggest asset, you put that in there and life moves on. You just keep adding to the trust, right?
Yeah. So there's kind of two sides to that equation. So the first side is when I create a trust, it's again, back to that vehicle analogy. It's an empty vehicle, big, empty Suburban. And we design it so you can use that vehicle, as you need. If you're going to go down to Costco and fill up the back, you don't have to call Chevy and say, hey, do I have permission to fill up the back of the Suburban? You just do it. The same with the trust. It's designed so you can acquire more assets or sell assets, and you don't have to have the attorney involved with that. But if you need a structural change, like a bigger engine or, a wheel job or whatever the case may be, that's when you come back to the attorney and say, hey, I have these new assets that require more, engine, more, whatever the trust needs. And then we can add on to that.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I will say, just like my disclaimer, because if people do own property and trust and we're doing a mortgage on it, I get all that documentation. So make sure everybody has a copy. And if they don't, make sure your attorney's not 100 years old. So if a grandma and grandpa have a trust and their buddy that was their same age did the trust for them at some point, maybe get a new attorney who's still working. So yeah, I have definitely chased down not me personally, had clients chase down a fair share of old trust documents that, were in someone's closet somewhere. So everybody keep a copy. Yeah.
You want to make sure that the trust is in place and you have the legal authority to do things. But then you want to manage the expectation by sharing the trust, by having the trust in the hands of key people, not just the old club. We want to make sure that one of the younger kids that are going to be the successor trustee, have a copy of it and they know where they can find it. Because again, without that in hand, it's not going to do any good.
Yeah, for sure. That is definitely, I'm sure you have plenty of stories on that. That has definitely stalled a fair share of deals for my clients, because they're looking for grandpa and grandpa's trust and it's just in a three-ring binder in their basement. So yeah.
There's a frustration involved with that too, because even if, Tara knows that Michael did her mom's trust, if Tara calls Michael and says, I need a copy of the trust, Michael's going to say, who? Because I'm still under attorney-client privilege with your mom. So unless your mom has specifically told me that I can talk to you about it, I can't, even if she's passed away.
Oh, interesting. Good. Also a good point. Yeah.
And they think attorneys are being squirrely. No, we're just following the rules.
That makes sense. Yeah, same. I can't share personal information about any of my clients either. So that good point too. So moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas out there, make sure multiple copies exist and everybody understands what's in it.
When you know that mom and dad have made a trust and the general gist of it, you don't have to say paragraph 2 says this, paragraph 7 says, like, you just, hey kids, there's a trust. The house is in the trust. When it comes time, this is where you find it. This is what to expect. Managing that expectation is pretty important. I say, like, Yoda was a great Jedi master, but he waited until he was 900 years old on his deathbed to announce that there was a second heir. Like, that's what, starts evil empires. That's what sends
that's right.
He didn't manage that expectation. But, if he would have said, hey, there's a trust and, you'll find out about this other heir in there, then there would have been an expectation.
Yeah, makes sense. So, so you talk a lot about trust as a wealth building tool. Exactly. How does it help us build wealth?
So a lot of us view trust as this death planning thing, like we're Vikings or Klingons and we want to plan to die well. And I will for that, especially if you are a Viking. That's awesome. But I want to live well. And I share this, with a kind of a Star Trek analogy. When they go into space, like, you got your Data, you got your Captain Picard, all your key players, right? I think the key player is the shield. The shield allows them to go into space and to explore that space. It keeps them breathing. It keeps them from getting shot down by enemies. The trust is kind of like that shield. It puts this legal shielding around you so that you have the confidence to go out and explore your own space and live your best life. So yes, when you pass away, these systems are in place, but they're also in place now to start building, preserving, growing, protecting, and really being intentional about creating the assets that will fund the legacy. And so, part of your story, your legacy, is how well you lived. And if you have that protection control that comes along with estate planning, it's really, all about the days that you live. And then, we're ready for the day you die, but that's only one versus tens of thousands. Just a fundamental shift. When we've got that in place, we look at life a little different. We're prepared for the unknown. We don't have a crystal ball, but if this happens, then we're ready for that. Yeah,
for sure. And I think we had talked about it when we set up my mom's stuff. It's just nice to know that part is taken care of. And then as she got older and got sicker and couldn't speak, that stuff was taken care of. We knew her husband, when he was going to be okay. And it was just nice to know that part was all planned out. Obviously, there was some work that had to be done and, just tasks to be completed after she passed. But then we just got to kind of enjoy her the last little bit of time that she had with us, and wasn't like, okay, where did she put this thing? And, or what are we going to do about the house? And any of all that stuff. It was kind of, we got that taken care of and just focused on spending time with her. And that was really nice.
Comes with that peace of mind. But when we talk about the now, and especially in the mortgage world, as you're using mortgages to leverage your position to buy not only your home but your investment properties, we can start using trust in tandem with LLCs and creating structural devices that create insulation, that create limited protection, and really start allowing you to build an empire, have control, have options. I was talking to someone just the squatters issue is a really big issue. There's actually an opportunity to use your trust to level the playing field if you have squatters in your house. That's a whole other conversation. But
if you are a landlord, there's some other things you can do, other tools you have in your toolbox to help with some of those kind of things, where maybe like other like squatters you might feel like they have more rights than you do as the actual homeowner. So that's great. Like any tool we can use to kind of protect our homes, our money, I think as things just become more expensive, I think we've got to use every tool we can to like keep as much money in our pockets as we possibly can. So
I also use another analogy. It's a spare bedroom analogy. If you ever have a spare bedroom in your home, it doesn't typically stay empty. You start filling it up with things,
sure.
or with guests, or with both. and your trust becomes that spare bedroom. Like you intentionally start filling it with assets because you have it. So just by simply virtually having it, now you're intentionally creating something that you weren't working towards before because you didn't have it.
Yeah, that's true. I always tell everybody, but don't worry, you'll fill your new house up with all your crap. So cool. Any other final words of wisdom for people? It doesn't have to be trust related, but homeowners or potential homeowners, or it can be trust related, whatever you want.
So, there's, like I said, there's just a lot of options that we have with trust. There's a lot of good people out there that are just trying to do the best that they can. And they want to protect mom and dad. And, you see things like, oh, we're going to put, son on the house. So there's no probate, when we die, son will get it. Or we're going to put daughter on the bank account for, kind of the same reasons. But there's some unintended consequences that are going to come with that the family didn't see or ever expect. Like if son's on the house, you could possibly lose the step up in basis and have a larger capital gain. The son could have a larger tax consequence because he was the owner of the house. There's a liability issue there. Like if the son gets sued, if he's the owner of the house, guess what's going to be a part of the lawsuit? Same with those bank accounts. And so, when it comes to estate planning, there's always good, better, best. And when I meet with a client, we're going to do an assessment, see where you are. There's no judgment, but I'm going to say, this is where you are. This is where you can be or here, depending on your, again, exposure and liability and your comfortability with what you're doing. And we're going to put a plan in place that not only protects you, but that you're going to be able to follow. Like we're not going to put a plan in place that's so administratively heavy. If you can't do that, that's just, it's going to hurt you. So we're going to put what is best for you. And that's why it's important to talk to a professional and not download something or borrow something from someone else. I could borrow a celebrity's trust, which was, spent thousands of dollars on, and it's really well written, but it wasn't really well written for me. And that's a big difference. And that could actually cause harm.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. Don't do anything without talking to a professional, even if it's like Google is not your friend in these situations. Like you said, don't add someone to title. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. Like whether you call me or call Michael or anybody, like there are IRS consequences, there are legal consequences, all of those things to doing anything to the title of your property. I will say there can be. So be very careful about doing that, especially when it comes to estate planning and inheritance things. Like it can be a very expensive mistake. So
yeah, once you're in the problem, you're stuck, and now you're fighting a litigious court battle. There might not be anyone fighting you, but you now have to go through procedure and rules of law that will cost you time and money.
For sure. No one really wants the government with their hands in your pocket, right? They're in our pockets enough. So, all right, well, cool. How do people get a hold of you?
So the best way is to just send an email at michael@legallifeplan.com. You can go to my website. It's above my head there. There's a lot of videos, a lot of training. Because, the first step is just to educate yourself. And the next step is to talk to me. And talking to me is not an obligation. It's, again, an education experience to find out what kind of vehicle you want, because you might not know. And you probably don't know. And so we'll talk about that and build an idea around what you're looking for. And then we'll, implement it when it's right for you.
Everybody follow him on Facebook and Instagram. He does, and YouTube, right? I think you also have your own YouTube channel. He does a lot of little videos that are very educational. I've actually learned a lot just from watching those. And I learned a lot today. So thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, if anybody has any questions about mortgages or estate planning, reach out to either of us and we'd love to chat with you.
Thank you.